Old English folk ballad. It dates from the 1400s. Today, we know the legend of Robin Hood because it was preserved and handed down in songs and ballads. So, there's a couple of those songs and ballads. We also want to thank the Lunenburg Library for hosting this show, and the Lunenburg Cultural Council and the Mass Cultural Council for supporting this show. We are Sultana, and this show is History and Legends Through Song. In this show, we're going to visit some characters and happenings from, ancient Mesopotamia into modern times. I'm going to do stuff like that because we're being televised, so I'm going to chop things and all kinds of things like that. We'll be visiting some characters and happenings from ancient Mesopotamia into modern times. Looking at history helps us understand each other and ourselves, and looking at history can be entertaining, like looking through a museum. We like to envision this show as a museum, set in songs and slides. First hall is the ancient world. Founder of the first known museum in history was Anagali. She was a high priestess to the moon god Nana in the Neo-Babylonian Empire, starting around 547 BC. She was appointed to that position by her father, King Nabonidus, who was sometimes considered the first archaeologist in history. He excavated sites dating as far back as the Akkadian Empire in the 3rd millennium BC. That would be between 2000 and 3000 BC. Anagali and Nabonidus were looking back to a past almost as distant to them as they are to us. 1, 2, 3, 4. A present to the past. make all these wonders. Thank you. Going back thousands of years to the earliest days of recorded history, long after hunter-gatherer bands had settled in city-states along rivers like the Tigris and the Euphrates, the people of those city-states told stories of heroes and gods in a flood. They passed those stories on from generation to generation. After many generations, a man named Sargon, from the city of Akkad to the north, rose to dominance over other men, and he united all those cities under his rule. That was the beginning of the Akkadian Empire. Sargon had a daughter, Enheduanna. He appointed her high priestess to the moon god and to the goddess of war and love. Enheduanna wrote poems and prayers to those gods and goddesses, and her name was inscribed along with those poems and prayers on tablets and cylinder seals. Because of that, Enheduanna became the first known author in history. In the meantime, the people continued to pass on the stories of the heroes and gods in the flood from generation to generation. And after many more years, empires rose and fell. The people were conquered and reconquered. Some migrated to other lands, and others were brought as captives to this land, now called Babylonia. And they remembered those ancient stories. The stories of ancient Mesopotamia influenced the stories of the ancient Greeks, the Persians, and the Hebrews. It can be said that much of Western literature is the legacy of ancient Mesopotamia. Maybe it can also be said that the voice of the individual is the legacy of Enheduanna. One, two, three, four.
From a blind man's every
Sargon the Great, the father of Enkiduanna, was a historical figure. After his lifetime, he became deified, and he became part of the myths and legends of ancient Mesopotamia. For some 2,000 years, he was considered to be the model for Mesopotamian kings. The earliest mention of the legendary model for English kings, King Arthur, comes from a 9th century pseudo-history written by a Welsh monk, Nennius. Later pseudo-histories gave rise to the stories and characters of Camelot. One of the characters of Camelot was Elaine of Astolat. She was a tragic figure. According to the author, Thomas Mallory, the story is her father was hosting a tournament and he asked Lancelot to participate in the tournament, which Lancelot was reluctant to do because the other knights of Camelot were in the tournament. But Lancelot finally agreed to do so in disguise, and Elaine fell in love with Sir Lancelot. So she gave him her ribbon to wear in the tournament, and he accepted that. And apparently, traditionally, that was something that ladies did for knights that were their significant other that they were attached to. And the knight would wear the ribbon if he agreed to that, and Lancelot wore the ribbon. Well, Lancelot won the tournament, but he was injured, and afterwards Elaine took care of him. And after he was better, he offered to pay her, which she was deeply insulted by, and that realized at that point that Lancelot didn't feel the same way about her that she did about him. So she vowed she would die for love, and she did. And she left a request in her last letter that her body be placed in the barge with a single flower in hand and sent down the river to Camelot, which was done. And the body was found, and Lancelot, being the bigly fellow that he was, did the noble thing and paid for her funeral. He was a good guy. There's a picture of Lancelot and Elaine. And there's a famous painting of Elaine. Elaine also figured in Tennyson's Idylls of the King. And in his version, she sings a song before she dies. It's called A Song of Love and Death. And we've put that song to music. The character of Elaine belongs purely to legend, whereas the character of Sargon, as I mentioned, was a historical figure who became legend. Works of fiction often have their basis in real characters and real events. Sometimes those works of fiction can give rise to legends all their own. We're now going to fast forward to the 20th century. Imagine it is October 30th, 1938. That would be the season for this one. Thousands of Americans are gathered around their radio to listen to the popular Chasing Sanborn Hour, hosted by Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. The musical guest of the night is operatic crooner Nelson Eddy. According to a popular legend, a popular urban legend, when the first musical interlude starts and Nelson Eddy is about to begin performing, a large number of listeners turn the dial and find themselves tuned into another station where they're hearing a dance band being broadcast live from the Hotel Park Plaza in New York. That broadcast is shortly interrupted by a news bulletin. That news bulletin doesn't interrupt the Chasing Sanborn Hour, so the people who are listening to Nelson Eddy don't know what's going on.
One, two, three, four.
If you listen to Nelson Eddy, then you don't know what's going on. Facing by the mountain, a lot of fun. It was broke through the broken. That was near the radio. So you don't run. The world is in crisis. Doomsday is upon us. And as we sit in Monterey, you don't know what's going on. You only listen to these sappy songs going around. Your head buried in the sand. Far off in the distance, there were explosions in the sky, and there was nothing anyone could do. Wonder why? Now the enemy has been, and an invasion has begun, and there was no safe place to hide, and nowhere to run. The world is in crisis. Doomsday is upon us, and it hasn't sent me on there. Don't know what's going on. You only listen to sappy songs that go around. Your head buried in the sand. You didn't hear the breaking storm. You didn't hear what's going down. You didn't hear the siren. You didn't hear the sound of the sand. You didn't hear the cafe signal. You didn't hear the soldiers cry. You didn't hear the shrieks of terror. You didn't hear the newsman's cry. Oh, you didn't hear. If you're listening to Charlie McCarthy, then you will know a thing. You twice like a puppet on a string. Now you feel like a dog, but now loved ones and your pals. Think about the good times and old wells.
Is that last picture Nelson added too?
No, that was Orson Welles.
That was all else.
I thought, I was watching the world get older.
Nelson Eddy would have gained a lot of weight.
Definitely not. Not as pretty as Nelson Eddy, but cool.
Well, the War of the Worlds novel was intended by H.G. Wells as a statement on imperialism and colonialism as it was being practiced by the European powers in the 19th century. But some sort of subjugating conquered peoples in some form of colonialism long predates the 19th century, and it wasn't practiced only by European powers. The 1389 Battle of Kosovo was a major event in the history of Europe and in the folklore of the Balkans. The battle pitted the remnants of the medieval Serbian Empire under Prince Lazar against the rising Ottoman Empire under Sultan Murad I. Not much is known of the actual battle because the leaders on both sides were killed and both armies were pretty much wiped out. History is not for the faint of heart. Historians agree it was probably a draw, but the Ottomans had reserves and the Serbians did not, so it ultimately proved to be an Ottoman victory when decades later, Serbia was absorbed into the Ottoman Empire as a vassal state, a sort of colony. The battle also entered into legend, and the legend would be preserved for centuries in the monasteries on Fruška Gora mountain in Serbia. In the legend, during the heat of the battle, Prince Lazar has a vision of a saint in which he's offered a choice between a kingdom in heaven or a kingdom on earth. Lazar chooses the kingdom in heaven, and the Ottomans are happy to oblige. The legend of the Battle of Kosovo would be a rallying cry in the Serbian independence movement in the 1800s. And the reverberations of the 1389 battle would be among the sparks that would start the First World War and would still be felt as recently as the 1990s in Bosnia. Empire, Thank you. Now we'll move on to a part of the show that's more relevant to all of us here. Old New England. That's a famous picture of Boston. You've probably come across it online, maybe. It's the oldest still existing aerial photo in the world. It dates from around 1860. It was taken from a manned balloon flight. And manned balloon flights and especially photography, of course, were both products of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution led to an increase in the population, and also led to an increase in urbanization. And in Boston, that led to a water supply problem that resulted in a number of uncontrolled epidemics and uncontrolled fires that broke out in the 1800s. And that problem got worse through the 19th century as indoor plumbing was developed and then increased and came into use. In 1895, the Board of Health recommended putting a dam on the Swift River and creating a reservoir that would provide water, clean water for the people of Boston. And when that plan was implemented some decades later, that created the Quabbin Reservoir. And it also brought about the loss of 4 New England, 4 Massachusetts towns, Enfield, Prescott, Dana, and Greenwich. We'll leave up that pretty picture of the Quabbin while we tune.
but a ghost town underneath the reservoir. And the state took the land, and the family was there. Nothing can stay there anymore. But it's empty, it's still. You can hear the call of the whippoorwill, or the ghost town underneath the reservoir. It was a nightmare most people never dream of, like a horror story Lovecraft didn't write. When the home that they believed would always be there was taken from them nearly overnight. Every building in the town was razed, even the dead were raised. It was like an image culled from Gothic lore. Now only restless souls haunt the silent cells of a ghost town underneath the reservoir.
Can you still see the church spire in the club?
Sticking up out of the water.
Not sticking up out of the water, but there was one town that was only partially submerged.
You used to be able to see a white church spire under the
I
water,
don't think you still can out of the water. I don't think so.
That's
I haven't heard about
unless it was a dream.
It goes with the ghost
It
story.
did.
It really does.
that.
Do you know?
No, I didn't, that's the first time I even heard about it. I was like, wow, that's sad.
Until fairly recently, history was most often told by men and mostly about women. That being the case, even though by nature women are at least 50% of the story. Just in this show alone, we've already looked at, was a woman who founded the first known museum, was a woman who's the first known author. Well, women played an important role, major role in the Industrial Revolution as well, and in the home industries here in New England, one of which was shoemaking. This next song is about the New England shoemakers strike of 1860. It happened in Lynn and Haverhill and some other cities as well. And this strike ultimately did not turn out to be a success because only the men were given raises, the women were not. The women were split into two groups, though the newer generation worked in factories, factory girls, and the older generation, which was the outworkers that worked in traditional home industries. Here's a picture of some factory workers. Here's some outworkers. Here's a strike. This song is called The Outworkers.
One, two, three. An industry born in the wake of revolution. Shoes must be made to be worn in the new nation. They need blue leather tan. Merchants will supply the demand.
next song is the story of Hannah Duston. Is anybody here familiar with that story? Hannah Duston was a Puritan woman in colonial Massachusetts. She got caught up in the events of her day when she was outwitted by Abenaki Indians during a raid on Haverhill in 1697. The raid was part of King William's war between France and England, and the Abenaki were allied with France. It's a grisly story with allegations of killing women and children on the part of both sides. The Abenaki during the raid on Haverhill and Hannah Duston when she escaped her captors. The plot thickens further when, from a modern perspective, we can see that Hannah might have been the victim of an abusive childhood. It also included a case of infanticide. Maybe what the story illustrates is what can happen in a violent world when you combine a person suffering from trauma with a society where intolerance is accepted or even encouraged, such as puritanical Massachusetts. Or maybe it's simpler to say our species is savage. Again, history is not for the faint of heart or stomach. This is the story of Hannah Duston.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I got to march in the last European Blues War. The Abenaki fell on the town. Their terrifying war cries flew in the air, like a tomahawk upon the morning calm. Hannah Duston was at home in bed lying there. Her nurse Mary was tending to the child. When the warriors burst in, made their captives, taken into the foreboding wild. And the wilderness was for the savage, but he was fine to the devil's will. But Christians understood not to go and there were savages in them. And us neighbors married with the baby were taken north along their man. They were sold to the French to live as pigs, or kept captive for a time and sent back. The Abenaki took the English prisoners into their God-forsaken world. Then the spirit goes the newborn started crying, so they barbarously killed the girl. And the wilderness was for the savage, but he was bound to the devil's will. But Christians understood not to go into the world. There were savages in them. Well, there lived Indians and captives were kept till one night, but the Indians slept. And Hannah Duston had a plan. She prayed it would succeed, that by the coming of day so guided by faith, she went on the attack, and slowly sleeping Indians with a fist and axe. Surely she did what she needed to do when she killed women and the children too. Well, the counties helped, then down took their scalps. They were more than 50 pounds for those Indian crowns, and just a tale upon the matter. You said she was like jail from the Bible, for she had killed the servants of the devil when she took vengeance for the murder of her child. Cotton Valley didn't come to the Indians. He got it right and just they were killed. no room for pious Christians. We settled on the land as God. And the wilderness was for the savage, full of heathens bound to do the devil's will. But Christians understood not to go into. There were savages who gave
Hannah Duston did indeed become a popular patriotic symbol. Her story became popular in the 1800s, and it appeared in print a number of times in books and in story collections as one of the captivity stories. And it's been suggested that some of that appearing in print at the time, the frequency might have been a form of propaganda to justify the mistreatment and exploitation of American Indians that was going on at the time. Written works, including propaganda, can shape a people's beliefs and ideas. Over time, the original written work can be lost or forgotten, but the ideas and the beliefs that it spawned still affect our world. Manetho was a priest in Hellenic Egypt, though there's some question as to whether he was even a real person. He's credited with writing a history of ancient Egypt that's lost. It's known only from fragments of 2 summaries that were written 1,000 years after his presumed lifetime that are also lost. We know from the writing of Josephus that Manetho's history contained a reworking of the story of Moses. It was probably anti-Hebrew propaganda, and it's considered one of the possible roots of anti-Semitism. Maybe there was a copy of Manetho's history in the Library of Alexandria, or maybe even in the Library of Nalanda in India. Both of those ancient libraries were destroyed by conquerors and zealots, resulting in the loss of thousands of ancient works, most of which can most likely never be recovered. This next song is about the loss of books, the loss of works in libraries. Manetho's evil, the evil of Manetho, is about the misrepresentation of history through propaganda and in an attempt to sway people's beliefs. This song is called Ashes. Oh, Manetho's not here.
Please.
Yeah.
I'm glad you had a last song. I'm glad you had a last song.
Every now and then, there are lessons they'll never be learned. In the ashes of books that were burned. There were once houses of wisdom filled with works that had been written by the oracles and learned men and authors of those things. But frenzied mobs of zealots sworn to Jesus and Muhammad, destroyed that ancient knowledge when they set those stacks of praise. In the fire of operant plants, you might have heard the Nico laugh. When you burn the knowledge of the past, just ignorance remains. So the archives of Tiergarten and the works of Bile and Salt and the words of Heinrich Heine were cast into the flames. And there are stories that won't be heard again. Not heard, not even now and then. There are lessons that will never be learned. In the ashes of books that were burned. Thank you.
It's hard to clap when you read that.
Yeah, it's hard.
The migrations are one of the driving forces in history. Migrations usually arise out of hardship, and often they lead to hardship as people compete for limited land and limited resources. And then often the fear of change and the fear of what's different results in xenophobia, and that results in, that leads to prejudice and discrimination and the other bad things that sometimes go along with migrations, unfortunately. But migrations can also be positive. They can also lead to a betterment for humanity and a flourishing of the arts as people from different backgrounds come together and as individuals are inspired by their new surroundings. With all of the trouble and violence in history, we wanted to end this show on a positive note, an uplifting note. This next song is about the Great Migration of Black Americans out of the oppression of the Jim Crow South in the early 1900s. The Great Migration didn't end prejudice or discrimination, but it's a major event in the history of this country that should be celebrated. It set the stage for the Jazz Age, it ushered in the Harlem Renaissance, and it strongly influenced 20th century American culture. It's one of the defining moments in our history. The individual accomplishments of the writers, thinkers, and artists of the Jazz Age and the Harlem Renaissance, and those they inspired, is something we all can take pride in. This last song is called Northbound Train. Some of the slides are paintings by artist Jacob Lawrence from his Migration series depicting the Great Migration. And before we start the song, I want to thank you all again for coming out tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. And anyone has any questions and wants to chat afterwards, we're happy to do that. And thanks again to the Lunenburg Cultural Council for making this happen in the library.
They were going to Chicago. They were going to DC. They were going to Ohio. Down in Tennessee. They were heading up to Harlem. Carolinas. They boarded town in Florida. They left the Mississippi fields.
They left the Alabama mines.
They got on board a train and left Dixie behind. Northbound train rolling off the track. From that train there'd be no turning back. Moving up the line, going over the ground. Then we got another train that was northbound. They got word at the station when the porter brought the news that it was time to pack their bags and put on their traveling shoes and embark on a migration for a northern destination, more promising location for the promise of a nation.
Of the Atlantic coastline, on the other end,
All the NCO Philly and off the
in the South End,
on the Seminole from Jacksonville and on to Illinois. They caught the special from St. Louis to Detroit. Northbound train going off the track. From that train there'd be no turning back. Moving up the line, going over the ground. They were riding on a train that was northbound. Thank you very much.